Hello guys, welcome back to another video of our React tutorial series. In this video, we're going to talk about React query for server state management. We're going to see how to fetch data and catch the data in our application. You know, when you are working with APIs in React, you are actually managing what we call server states. And when we say server state, we mean the data that lives on the backend, not the data in your application. So React query helps you to fetch and manage that server state easily. So before we proceed, have this at the back of your mind that your server state is not your local component state. And also know that the React query is basically data fetching, data catching, background updates, and many other things that's involved in data fetching. So in this video, we use React query to fetch data, handle loading and error state, and see how it catches and refetches data automatically. So one would want to ask, why are we not using useEffect and useState combined to achieve all of this? Have it in mind that you can fetch data with useEffect and of course useState, but you end up writing a lot of repetitive code, loading, error, refetching, fetching, and lots of logic. You need to write them over and over again. So we chose the React query because we don't want to have repetitive code, because the React useEffect and useHook does not have built-in catching. It does not have manual refetching. So React queries handles all of that for you, and of course you're going to see how it is awesome and out of the box. So the first thing we're going to do here is to install the React query. So we'll open up our terminal and we're going to do npm install @tan stack / React query. So I'm going to drop this in the description of this video. If I hit enter, this is going to install React query in our application. All right, this is done, and we'll proceed. First thing we're going to do is to wrap our application with the React query provider. How do we do that? We'll go over to our main.jsx. Go to our main.jsx, and we're going to wrap our application with the React query provider. First, we're going to import a few things. We're going to import query client from React query. We're going to import query client from React query, and we're also going to import query client provider. So we're going to import these two things from React query. So we'll proceed to initialize our query client. Here we're going to say const query client is equal to a new, we're going to initialize a new instance of query client. Right. So after this, next thing we're going to do is to wrap our application with our React query provider. We're going to say query client provider, which we imported here. We're going to wrap it around our application. Just like this. And the query client provider accepts one parameter, which is the client, and of course we're going to pass in the client that was initialized here. And that is it for our main.jsx. This set up React query globally in our application. So we'll move over to creating a fetching function that will help us to fetch data from our API. We're going to do this by creating a folder. We're going to create a folder called API. And inside of this folder, we're going to create just a file called user.js. This is going to help us fetch our data. Just like we did in our last video, we're going to use the JSON placeholder to fetch this data. So first, I'm going to import HSOS. Make sure you install HSOS if you did not watch the previous video. I will import HSOS from HSOS, right? And secondly, I'm going to create the function that will help us to fetch data. I'm going to do that by saying export const get users. It's going to be an async function, right? So what is this function doing for us? It's going to use the HSOS to make the API call, I'm going to say const response is equal to await issues. It's taking one parameter, right? Parameter is the URL we're making the request from. We're saying HTTPS. Just like in our previous video, I'm going to provide this URL in the description of this video. JSON placeholder.typicode.com/users. Right, this is it. And at the end of this, we're just going to return the response. We're going to say return response.data, right? So that is it for the user. We're going to move over to using our use query in our component. So we're going to create a new component. We're not going to use our profile.jsx anymore. We're going to create a new component, basically a new page, and we're going to call it list users.jsx. So if we do this, we're going to export a component. We're just going to create a component, say function list users, right? And I'm going to export this function, say export default function. So if we export this, we'll go to our app.jsx and create a route for it. So I'm just going to create a route. I'm going to change this default route to login. So our default route will just be this. So this is going to be list users, right? Remember, I'm importing list user from our pages/list users. So this is it. We'll go over to our list, go back to our list users. We're going to do some few things, and one of the things we're going to do here is to import use query from stack/React query. So I'm going to import use query from stack/React query. Right. After that, we're going to import the fetch user function we exported from our API folder. So I'm going to say import fetch users, right, from API/user. The next thing we're going to do is to initialize our use query. So how do we do that? We'll go over to this area. We're going to say const data is loading error is equal to use query, right? The use query takes few parameters. The first parameter of the use query is the query key. The query key here, we're going to pass in an array, say user. And the second parameter is the query function. Which function are we calling for this? We're calling the get user function, which is going to help us fetch data from our API. Right, so after this, we're going to move ahead to manage our loading state and manage our error state. We're going to say if is loading, right, just like we did in our previous video, just return a paragraph tag with the text loading. We're going to move ahead to also manage the error. Say if error, we're going to return a paragraph tag, say error, and we're going to state what the error is. We're going to say error.message, right? So we'll move ahead to now render our users that have been fetched from our API. We're going to return an unordered list. That's inside our unordered list. We're going to map through our data. We're going to map through our data to render our user. So this is going to take the user and the index. And just here, we're going to return our list of users. And here we're going to say user.name. Right. So always remember to add your key to your list so it doesn't give you a rendering error. So this is going to be our index, right? Index of the list. So that is it for this component. We use our use query to fetch data and cache it, and it's also helping us to handle loading and error states for our application. So before we move over to run this application, I want you to have a few things in mind why we use the use query. Say because it has auto caching, it takes care of our background refetching, it refetches on window focus, and also very important, it avoids duplicate requests. Those are the main reasons why we are looking at the React query today. So we'll go ahead to run our application. We're going to do npm run dev. I'm going to hit enter, and our application opens in port 5173. And if we try to run this on our browser, it opens up to this page. We have an error, say query client has already been declared. This is happening in our main.jsx. So we'll go back to our main.jsx and see query client. We already have query client, so we're going to change this to a smaller letter. Right, and we're going to pass it here, and this should solve our problem. We see query client has already been redeclared in main.js line 6. So we'll go over to line 6. We have two query client initialized declared here, so we're going to take out one. This should solve our problem. Now we have the list of users from our API. If we go over to our list users, we see that we just mapped through the user and did all of this. Let's see how, after loop mapping, let's just log out our users and see what they look like, what the object look like. So if I inspect this page, open up my console, I'm going to see an object of user, address, and company, right? So we can map all of this. You can create a component for this to list our users. So we have a video where we talked about list rendering in React. You can go back to it and see how that is done. So what happens when we want to manually refetch this data? Want to click a button and want the button to refetch this data after a while. What are we going to do? We're going to first of all create a button here. Let's try to render multiple components here. So here we're going to create a button in our list user.jsx. We're going to create a button and we're going to say refetch data. Right, if we save this, we'll go back, we have this button refetch data. So how do we manage to refetch data on click? We're going to have on click event, and the on click event is just going to call a function that is going to help us refresh this data. And we said the React query helps us to refetch data, save the data in cache the data actually, and does all of that for us. That means we can have access to the refetch property of this use query. So all we're going to do is call it here and call it in our on click. So whenever I click this button, this data refreshes. If we go back to our React application, we reload. If we try to click this data, it refreshes because the data does not change, and React query does this in background. It updates the data without trying to make it look so obvious. So summarily, I would want to tell us that React query manages server state. React query uses use query to fetch and cache data. Of course, it's auto loading. It takes care of our errors, it takes care of our refetching, and from what we can see, it is very clean and has just minimal code. With just these few lines of code, we're able to make an API call, catch the data, and refresh the data. And we also said React query removes the boilerplate of data fetching. It's perfect for APIs that changes often or needs catching. If you're building things like e-commerce where you need to fetch data often, fetch product often, cache the data, and refetch whenever there is an update, use tools like the React query to handle all of that. So guys, that is it for this video. If this was helpful, please don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and if you have any question, drop in the comment section and we'll respond to it. See you guys in the next video. Bye for now.